What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this weather outlook for Sunday, April 30th, 2023. Today we are watching a very big system that is coming up the East Coast. You can see it here on satellite. There are two areas of low pressure, one over the Great Lakes, one that is off the South Carolina coast right now, or actually, no, it's over South Carolina. These two systems are going to essentially phase together, and this one off South Carolina is really going to bomb. It's going to continue straight up I-95, come up over New York State, and eventually end itself up over New York State through to the Great Lakes, where you see this low right here that is over Michigan right now, and it's essentially going to spin over the Great Lakes for multiple days. Let's take a look at radar. You can see there's moderate to heavy rainfall across much of Pennsylvania and into New York State. We do have an area of thunderstorms southeast of the low down on the southeast coast of Florida. Then we do have convection, which is forming around the low in North Carolina and portions of western South Carolina. This low will come up the coast and get a lot stronger. Let's take a look at the hazards here. You can see there are flood watches up for portions of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York State, even up in Maine and New Hampshire. And we continue to have our flood situation out in the west coast from the snow melt. And then you can see we have a threat for some freezing conditions in portions of Kansas and Nebraska, which is something that has to be watched. And look at this. Yes, winter storm warnings are up for portions of Michigan and Wisconsin because there will be a snow aspect to this system as well. Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk up for portions of the Carolinas in through portions of the Delmarva and Virginia. Slight risk in effect in southeast Florida, where there is currently a tornado watch. There is a 5% chance of a tornado from North Carolina into Virginia today. Wind is another threat, as is hail, but wind and tornadoes are the biggest threat for that area today. Taking a look at the excessive rainfall, two areas of slight risk today. One up here in New England, where there's going to be some pretty heavy rainfall that comes across portions of Maine, not only from the low, but also from orographic land features, which is going to generate upsloping, which is going to keep the rain going. And we could see anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe even localized 5 inches of rainfall in that area being printed out by the models. In southeast Pennsylvania or eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City area, New York State, Maryland, and even portions of Delaware, there's also an excessive rainfall risk here. We've already seen heavy rainfall in my neck of the woods in Philadelphia this morning. More is coming, and we'll have to watch what happens when the low passes by tonight. Let's take a look at the latest 12Z HRRR run, and we'll kind of time this out. You can see the first area of heavy rain, which is going through southeast Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania right now. You can see the old low over the lakes. That's starting to die out, and this low that's coming up the I-95 corridor gets stronger and stronger. It actually gets down into the low 980s, almost into the 970s, and the HRRR model does show a 979 over New York State and even 978 millibars when it goes over to Canada. Eventually this is going to continue, and it may even deeper further. As you can see here, 976, 975, and it's going to find itself over the Great Lakes by later tomorrow. And there's going to be moisture that's wrapped around this. So it's going to be cold for this time for May. We're going into May, and it's going to be cold for May. And yes, again, we're talking May snow in northern Wisconsin and the western portion of Michigan. And watch what happens here. The low is essentially going to stall for the Great Lakes. You're going to see multiple days of showers, Philadelphia, New York City. And look out on the West Coast. I don't want to forget about you as well. You're going to see a showery setup as well from an upper level low of your own. Let's go a little further out in the forecast. Let's take a look at the GFS model for today. Here comes that low that comes up the coast. And 995, it winds itself over the lakes, and look what happens here. It doesn't exit the northeast picture until Thursday. It finally exits the coast, and look at that. It becomes an area of low pressure, becomes a coastal system again out in the Atlantic. Then finally, even on Friday, there's still some showers that wrap back around as another piece of energy rotates around that. Then finally, it does clear out in time for next weekend. At this point, next weekend in the Northeast is looking better. If we take a look in the southern U.S., there are a few threats of showers and thunderstorms later in next week. And the West Coast, look what happens in the Northwest. You find yourself in a long rotation, unsettled pattern yet again. The plains, as we get into the longer ranges, we may have to start watching for some more severe threats, but the Northeast in the long range does look quieter as of right now, at least through, we'll say about May 7th onward. Prior to that, we, like as I said, we're still going to have to deal with the effects of this stubborn system that is going to take a long time to clear out. And I will say this, we're not looking at above average temperatures for the Northeast for a long period of time. The West Coast may finally get above average temperatures if these upper level systems can behave and exit the picture. Check this out. Now we're in the 300 hour. This is a really unreliable range, but you can see over Texas, you do start to see some storminess again, which is something that has to be watched. And the storms part is bad news, but the precipitation is good news because it's good for the drought situation there. All right, taking a look at precipitation over the next 7 days, you can see some precipitation is expected in the West Coast. Highest amounts will be in the mountains. Check this out. They are actually going with 3 to 6 inches of rainfall in southwest Maine and a large portion of New Hampshire. There's even a 7-inch marker that's showing up here, so that's truly concerning, and that definitely promotes a flood risk. You can see across Pennsylvania, 1 to 2 inches of rainfall expected, isolated 2.5 inches. Same goes for New York State, isolated 2.5 inches being shown here. And look at the precipitation amounts across western Michigan and extreme northern Wisconsin. Your eyes are not deceiving you. That's 2 to 4 isolated 5 inches of precipitation from this low that is going to stall, because essentially you're going to have winds that are pouring off of the lakes. And with that wind pouring off of the lake, it does add moisture into the system. So it's something we will have to watch going into the week. Taking a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Below average temperatures in the east, below average temperatures in the west coast. Remember, we have the upper level system in the east, upper level system in the west. In between, you do get a wedge of above average temperatures. 8 to 14 day outlook shows things will eventually improve once we get past 7 days in the northeast. Above average temperatures expected in the northeast and in the plains, northern plains. And they're going with below average here in the southeast, through Texas, and in the west coast. The west coast, a lot of that's going to depend on the upper level pattern. If there's no upper level low stalled there, I would argue that this is too cold. It's pretty far out there in time, so we'll have to watch and see how that unfolds. Precipitation outlook shows below average precipitation in the northeast from 6 to 10 days. Prior to that, it is well above average. The west coast, above average thanks to the upper level systems. Southeast, slightly above average, as you do have these smaller disturbances that will come through and produce some shower and thunderstorm activity. 8 to 14 day, I do agree with this above average, or excuse me, below average precipitation in the northeast, simply because there will be a drier pattern, and just slightly above average for the rest of the country with some wedges of near normal precipitation in between. Alrighty, that does it for today's weather outlook. If you're in the northeast today, stay safe. There's going to be some heavy rain, and with a low this strong, especially along the coast, there could be wind gusts 30 to 50 miles per hour. So that's something you're going to really want to pay attention to. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all again next time.